Ready to go. I just want to say thank you for being here. I'm running a little bit different kind of a campaign that you might be used to. I'm talking substantively about issues. And I'm doing it in a way where I'm going to tell you my ideas. And this education plan has been evolving with the input of a lot of educators over the last year. We have lots of superintendents, teachers, principals here. And this is the time for you to tell me what you like about it, what you don't like about it. And what you'll find is I'll take the best of your ideas and it'll be incorporated in the next one. Because I didn't start out thinking I knew what I was doing in education, but I will tell you what I'm sure of, is that in the places in my life, and probably know a little bit about my background, I grew up in Detroit. I spent years as deputy county executive. I oversaw the construction of the airport, the McNamara terminal that you fly in and out of. I chaired the stadium authority that built Ford Field and Comerica Park. I was the Wayne County prosecutor, and at the time, the big hospital system in Detroit, the Detroit Medical Center, had lost $100 million a year for 5 years. They voted to close receiving, close Hutzel, and they called me and said, we want you to leave the prosecutor's job and come run the hospital. And they wanted somebody from outside of healthcare to do this. And when I got there, and with 11,000 employees, every place I went, you had all these talented nurses, doctors, caregivers. I said, how are these guys losing $100 million a year? And as I looked at it, the more I realized, you had really dedicated people trapped in a really bad system. My predecessor said the way these 8 hospitals were going to make money was each hospital would stand independently, and you make your own profit and loss. And so you have basically 8 independent competitors. And the first thing they did was go steal each other's doctors and patients. Well, the system went broke. I said, guys, there's no advantage to having 8 of you if you're all fighting with each other. I didn't know anything about healthcare, but I realigned it so we had a plan. We made a commitment to emergency room timeliness, etc. We functioned as a team. We grew from 11,000 to 14,000 employees. And I thought, all these smart people trapped in one bad system, that because you're inside, you don't realize it. Of course, I got to the city of Detroit, a place where there have been 400 homicides, 800 carjackings. And I looked at the Detroit Police Department, 2,300 people, and say, why are we having so much trouble? And it was the same thing. I saw cops who didn't have any kind of system behind them, any kind of technology behind them. We put in a system in place. We had a real-time crime center. We could monitor crimes. I got all the gas stations to put up cameras. So we had 1,000 places we could watch. And we went after the carjackers systematically. We went from 780 carjackings to 76 last year, 90% reduction. Our cops weren't any better. We put good people in a good system. I have never seen anything as bad, and I may offend some people here, as what's going on in the Michigan public school system. We have all kinds of dedicated teachers, really smart administrators, and yet you've seen what's happened in the student performance. And I am convinced the problem is not with our educators, the problem is not with our students. I think the problem is with the system. And the reason that I'm running, the number one reason is, I want to change the system. And I want you to watch what I talk to you tonight, and then I want to hear from you. If you think that what I'm seeing is right, or you have a different way to do it. So let me start with, all right, so we already have our first problem. So my eyesight isn't that great, but I cannot read that slide back in the room. All right. And so this is about how I believe Michigan has managed to trap good people in a bad system. And now the clicker's not working. Okay. Oh, we lost that. Okay. what is making it? All right. So let's see if this is going to work for a minute. So here's our public school system. In fact, let's go back, because there was actually one slide I cared about. This is just not going to work. All right. Okay. I tell you what, I'm going to click from here. All right. So what we have today, in my mind, this is Edwards Deming, my favorite quote. A bad system will beat a good person every time. And so here's Michigan's K-12 school system. You know what it has, right? $21 billion, 1.4 million students, public schools, charter schools, etc. And we have to start by facing reality as it is. And reality as it is that in the state of Michigan, 61% of third graders can't read at grade level. That's the state's own report from this past year. And you can say anything you want, but that number is something that should bother everybody. And after 25 years of decline, we're now 44th in the United States. And our graduating seniors, ACT and SAT test results are showing 72%, not college ready. And our CTE programs. The past superintendent, Dr. Rice, said 41% of our districts are CTE deserts. You have got in this state some phenomenal CTE programs, districts that have levied a millage, built huge centers. And you have a whole lot of districts that have virtually no programs in CTE, and I'll show you why that is. So, you know what's happening with the bond results, right? We're losing bond issues at a higher rate than we ever have before. Across the country, normally it's 80%. Now, it's been 50% are passing. And we have to recognize the fact that if we want to ask the people in this state to support the schools, we're going to have confidence in what those schools are doing. And so, here's what I'm saying. I'm going to talk to you today about 7 steps. First one is, I want to return the $1.3 billion that is being skimmed out of the school aid fund and put it back in the public schools where it belongs. All right? We've made progress on moving to weighted funding formulas. We've got to make more progress. Third, we need to deal with suspending lawmaker pay if they don't adopt your budget by July 1st. How many superintendents are there? Right? You went back to class the 1st of September, you didn't know what your budget was until October. Right? This is the kind of nonsense going on in Lansing. We got to create a Marshall Plan for early reading. Let's stop making complaints and defending ourselves. Let's just get these kids reading. We have to have a school measurement system that educators decide that doesn't change every 2 years. We got to rebuild our CTE program for all the high school students in this state, and we've got to put responsibility for school performance at the building and district level. Those are the 7 things I'm going to talk about today. You're going to agree with some of those things and not agree with some of those things. And this is the beauty about me running as an independent. I got Democrats who don't agree with some of the stuff I'm going to say. I got Republicans who don't agree with some of the stuff I'm going to say. But being an independent, I can just say what I believe. And you can decide for yourself if we had a strategy that was based on the students. Could it last long term? So let's start by diverting the money. And many of you remember the history, which is, I was doing good there for a second. Emily, you might as well just stay up there. Whatever I do, I'm not going to hit that back button again. So would you go back a slide or two? There we go. That right there, okay. I don't want to hit that back button again. So, 1994, we voted in this state, Proposal A, we raised the sales tax from 4 cents to 6 cents. The voters were told every cent was going to go to K-12 schools. That's what we voted on. And for 15 years, it did. And then, you have to deal with Lansing. So let's talk about what happened. Lansing began when the Great Recession hit. Jennifer Granholm said, hey, we're in trouble, it's a crisis, we're going to borrow $200 million from school aid fund one time, don't worry, we'll pay it right back. Because what was happening is the sales tax that's funding the school aid fund is going up faster than the other taxes. And so Lansing started looking and said, oh, I got an idea. Let's take the school aid money that's growing and let's slide it to our other things. And then in 2012, Rick Snyder came in. And he passed, you might remember his first act, a bunch of corporate tax cuts. And he said, I'm going to take $400 million a year out of the school aid fund, and it's going to cover our tax cuts. And said, okay, that's where it started to go. And we did not push back effectively enough. And now we've lost everything. And so this year, $1.3 billion taken out of the school aid fund for other things. All right, let's see if we have prosperity here. This is the history of the diversion of school aid fund, going back to 2006. And Granholm said $200 million borrowing, and then Snyder went to $400 million. By the time Snyder left office, $600 million. And this is not one party or the other, right? The Democrats, when Snyder took the $600 million in Lansing, they all said, this is a shell game. You're taking money out of the schools, you're putting it into other things. It's got to be stopped. And then the Democrats got elected. And it went up to $1.3 billion. I do not know how many times I heard Democratic candidates saying teachers are our most valuable asset, they're going to be paid, we're going to put the money in. And when they got there, they had other priorities and continued to raise the diversion. And what I'm saying is, I'm going to put it back. And so what you had is, they claim that they moved it to higher ed. That's nonsense. They put $1.3 billion in higher ed because the law from '94 said education. Then they took $1.3 billion out of higher ed, and they put it in all these other things. It's been nothing but a shell game, and somebody's got to stop it. And so here's what I'm saying to you. Over 5 years, I'm putting all of the K-12 money back in. We can't do it in just a 1 year because the general fund's gotten too dependent. But if over 5 years we will phase it all back in. Now, anybody can stand up here and tell you something, but you look at what my history is. I came into a Detroit Medical Center that had 15 days cash on hand. If you know how to manage, you can prioritize. I prioritized the emergency rooms, and we got them going, and we turned it around. When I came into the city of Detroit, we were in bankruptcy, right? We had nothing. You see what the city looks like today. $10 billion in investment, lowest unemployment rate, lowest crime rate in decades. I started by prioritizing police, affordable housing, and rebuilding the riverfront. When I get to Lansing, I'm saying we should be prioritizing our children's education. And so if you just reduce the increase 2% a year to the general fund, over 5 years you can put the $1.3 billion back, and then we say no more diversion. K-12 money stays in K-12. Second, we got to continue the transition to a fully weighted funding formula. And this is something Gretchen Whitmer has done well, the last few years in particular. They have moved to weighting, and you know what the different standards are: special ed, economically disadvantaged, the English learners, rural and isolated districts. They have started to weight the funding because it takes a different level of investment of a child depending on where they start. And we're starting to recognize it. And I like the steps they've taken. But even after that, Ed Trust Midwest says today that we are still in the bottom 10 in the United States in weighted funding. We've taken steps in the right direction, but like so many other things, we haven't done enough. Third priority. This is what I call the lawmaker accountability bill. And so state law is clear enough. You must adopt the budget by July 1st. But the legislators, when they adopted that law, they didn't put any penalty in. And so what you saw happen is the legislators get in and they start, right? July 1st, they didn't do it. August 1st, they didn't do it. September 1st, they didn't do it. I want you to think about this. Our teachers and our principals and our superintendents had to open a district, not knowing how much money they had. Could you fill teacher vacancy positions? Could you fill para positions? If you had an idea for a tutoring program, you couldn't start it the 1st of September because the money wasn't there. And when it came in the middle of October, what are you supposed to do? Hire a new teacher in November and then rearrange your class sizes? You have put our schools in a hole before you even start. And you say, why did they do this? And I can tell you why. And I'll keep coming back to, I didn't start out thinking that I was going to run for governor as an independent. It had been a whole lot easier for me to get elected governor as a Democrat. I know that. You don't have to tell me I'm crazy on this independent thing. Okay? But here's what I saw. When July came, the Republicans and Democrats, they liked this shutdown. They liked this budget because you know what they did? All the Democrats sent out letters to their donors, texts and tweets. The Republicans are trying to take away the free lunch program. Send me a check. And the Republicans, of course, were trying to block grant that money. And they sent out to their supporters. The Democrats are trying to take away local control of your districts. Send me a check. And in July and August and September, the Republicans and Democrats in the legislature benefited by raising money off of the conflict. And then in October, they came and adopted the budget. Worked out just fine for the legislators. But for our schools, don't go far. So we had, I can probably do it from memory by now, but we had within our school districts, 1 out of 6 school districts in this state in September increased class size because they were afraid to hire teaching positions because they didn't know about the budget. You can imagine, what are you going to do, fire the teacher in November when the budget comes in? And you had almost half of them left positions unfilled. This is why I say we've got good people trapped in a bad system. And so here's what I propose, lawmaker accountability bill. I said, if the state budget isn't passed by July 1st, we'll have a law. The legislators don't get paid until they pass it. Apply it to the governor, the lieutenant governor, state reps, and state senators. You don't pass a law July 1st, your paycheck stops until you do. And so that is a direction I think that we need to go. I put that forward, and it was interesting when I proposed that, 81% of the people in Michigan, when they polled it, said, we agree with Mike. Why are these guys getting paid if they aren't doing their jobs? Of course, in a part of this, they just went home. They weren't even meeting, but they were drawing their paychecks. And I say, this is what we have in Lansing today. It is so toxic between the Republicans and Democrats that they fight with each other, they go home because they can't get anything done. And how many superintendents have got here? Okay? How hard was it for you in August and September? Right? This is why we got to do something. Fourth, I want to talk about early reading. And you've seen the research from across the country. But here's the thing, and I'm going to keep saying this over and over. We can't deny reality. We've gone from 19th to 44th in the country. Now, does that mean nobody in the country has figured out how to teach 8-year-olds how to read? Indiana, at that same time, went from 14th to 6th. Mississippi, you keep hearing about the Mississippi Miracle, went from 49th to 9th. Louisiana, though, went from 47th to 15th. Idaho went from 32 to 19th. This isn't just some fluke that Mississippi was lucky and nobody else got it. You know what they did in each of these places? They ran the same kind of priorities. And so what they did was they had educator-based curricula. They didn't change the curricula every year. They taught the kids the so-called science of reading. They taught them phonics. They had tutors to back up the kids who were falling behind. They had paras to work them in small group settings. And they had extra training for the teachers. Every place was the same thing. We know what works. And the funny part about it is there's nothing about teaching third graders phonics and having tutors and paras to support them that's Republican or Democratic. But yet, the two parties keep fighting and can't get it done. And so what I want to do is go at this. Now, the state did one thing that was good. They started a program a year ago, $87 million, to try to incentivize the science reading. It's actually a drop in the bucket in a $20 billion program. Then they came back this year after they took all the credit, and they cut the funding. Okay? This is way too performative. And so, what I want to do is this. I want to add $500 million over 5 years in a comprehensive plan for early reading. Implement the science and reading curriculum. Invest in the teacher training. Teachers, as many of you know, teachers have been trained to teach reading in a completely different way. And what they found in other states is we got to go back and do training in this. Small group settings, high intensity tutoring, programming for summer and after school reading courses. One thing we need to do is make sure there's a library in every school. What I've learned going around this day, we got schools that don't have a library. You want to help kids read? Put a book in their hands, right? How can we be running schools without libraries? Expand the teachership apprenticeship programs, the teacher corps, create the kind of pipeline we need, and develop summer workshops to keep going on this. This is what we need, and I know you can do it. I want to talk about the school performance measurement, because as much as anything, I believe the reason our school performance has slipped has been this, that what we have is, you're good, is a history that what we have done is we go after school performance and we say, the way we do this is we're going to threaten to close your school. And you saw this under Rick Snyder. And then when he got to the point where he was ready to close the schools, he realized that the schools that he was going to close were in an area where they had or other schools that maybe weren't quite as bad, but were closed. So if you close the bad schools, the kids were going to get redistributed to other schools that were teeter already. So after going through years of this, he just said, forget the program, sent the accountability program back to the State Board of Ed. And here's what we had. 19th in the country in fourth grade reading, and now 44th. And you had, in 2012, all the schools in this state were graded A to F. And that was thought to be the way to go. And after that, 2014, A to F got repealed. Republicans put in A to F, Democrats came in and repealed A to F. But that's okay. They put in a new proposal. They graded every school in the state from top to bottom. Then they realized that was creating essentially a death sentence for the bottom ones, and so in 2016 they repealed top to bottom. Then in 2015 they put in a new system that will be not as harsh. We'll grade these schools red, green, and yellow. And then in 2017 they repealed red, green, and yellow. This is the state legislature. 2019 they said we got an idea. They readopted A to F. And in 2023, they repealed A to F. And then 2021, they put in third grade retention if the kids couldn't read. And then in 2023, they repealed third grade retention. This is what the superintendents and the principals and the teachers in this room have been dealing with for the last 12 years. Because here's what happens. When you have an evenly divided legislature, and every 2 years, they want to claim that they're making progress, the Republicans and Democrats kept flipping the standard back and forth. How are you supposed to run your district? And this is probably as much as anything that caused me to run for governor. Here's what I know. The only times in American history that a party has made a radical change is after they lost an election really bad. That is the only thing that makes a party rethink what it's doing from scratch. Of course, when Nixon took the Republicans down, the Republican Party really reinvented itself. When Ronald Reagan dominated the Democrats, the Democratic Party reinvented themselves. But in Michigan, because we're purple, every year is like 51-49, it flips back and forth. Nobody ever gets clobbered in an election in Michigan. We are trapped in Groundhog Day forever. All right? That's just the reality. And I look at this and say, I can get elected governor as a Democrat, and I'll pass a really good policy position, and the Republicans, of course, will all line up against me because I tried to beat them in their rep and Senate elections. And then when I'm gone, the Republicans will just turn it back. and I will have wasted years of my life. And this is the chart I'm looking at as I thought about my own choices. And I said, what if there's a different way? Is it possible to build solutions to this state that aren't only Republican and Democrat, that don't change back and forth every 2 years? And I went and I looked, and by now you can tell I'm a metrics-driven person. Every year since the 1980s, Gallup has done a survey nationally. And that survey asks people if you consider yourself a Republican, a Democrat, or independent. This year, Democrat, 27%, all-time low. Republican, 27%, all-time low. Independent, 45%, all-time high. The answer is hiding in plain sight. What would happen if somebody ran for governor and got elected Democrat who said, I'm not going to get involved in any of these state rep and state senate races? That you can elect a Republican Senate, you can elect a Democratic House, because I'm going to build a coalition of people of goodwill on both sides. Because I want you to think about this. How we evaluate our schools. Why should it be Republican or Democrat? How about we get educators to come up with a Michigan plan and that both parties adopt it so you aren't worried about what happens? Here's what we have seen, and I'll say to you, this is not Republicans or Democrats. This is fighting. When Engler left, we were 19th in the country. And Granholm came in, we were 27. Snyder came in, we were 35. When Whitmer came in, we were, is that 38? Okay, so you can see it better than I can. 38. Now we're 44. This has been going on for 25 years. This isn't the last cycle. This is what happens when you're in a state where you flip back and forth every 2 years, and politics is blood sport. And so we were in a system where we had 6 systems in 7 years. And last summer, did you see the vote? The House Republicans voted to eliminate Algebra 2 as a required high school course. Now, the reason they were doing it had some logic to it. They're trying to create flexibility in the high school curriculum for CTE. But I want you to think about this. Do you want state legislators voting class by class?
No.
What's in your curriculum?
No.
Okay? They were voting on art and Spanish as well. Those two didn't make the cut. But I'm saying, look, they had a good point that we need to do high school flexibility. But I watched some of that debate, and I got to tell you, I'm not impressed with the thoroughness of the backgrounds of the people debating whether or not Algebra 2 should be there. I'm not sure if much of them could have even passed Algebra 2. Now, that is over at the Senate, and so far the Senate's blocked it. But if we don't change where we're going, you are going to be in an education system where every 2 years they're trying to change your curriculum based on how many Republican and Democratic votes there are. And so I'm saying, do we need to make a change? And so this sounds impossible, right? You'll never get people to come together and agree. I'm going to tell you a story about what happened in Detroit. Because in Detroit, of course, we've had enormous success. We had 7,000 people move into the city last year. We led the state of Michigan population growth. But you know what we didn't have? We didn't have parents with school-age children. We have got to bring back the schools. And so what we had was a group of people who came to me in 2017, and they issued a report. And in Detroit, we basically have 200 schools, 100 traditional schools and 100 charter schools. So parents have an enormous amount of choice. The problem is they have no idea on how to evaluate it, because how do you know how to grade your schools? Every school has promotional material, right? And so at the end of the day, we had the lowest third grade reading score in the United States with 200 choices. And so this group said to me, okay, here's what we need to do. The mayor should come in, not to run the schools, but to set up a standard. Could the mayor bring Detroit Public Schools and the charter schools together and the teachers union? David Hecker, the president of the Michigan Teachers Union, all came in together and said, let's write a report. And here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to create a guide which every school in the city has got pictures and shows you what their programs are, and then we'll give you a grade so that you as a parent can evaluate. And so I said, can we do this? We'll describe each school and we'll give each school's grade. So that now you're a parent, you can say, this school a mile from me specializes in math, they got a D. This school that's 3 miles away has a broader curriculum focus, they got a B. You could start to evaluate in a meaningful way. And this is part of our problem. We are not in the state giving parents understandable ways to evaluate schools. I defy you to go on the State Board of Ed website and try to evaluate the schools in a meaningful way. You need to have a PhD in computer science to figure it out. But parents ought to be able to make a decision. And so here we did. I said, okay, I don't know if this is going to work. I went and saw Dr. Vitti, our great superintendent. I said, I want you to come on board and do this. And he's like, okay, the mayor's going to do this, and I'm going to sit in the room with the charters, and I'm going to sit in the room with the teachers union. How's that going to work? I got them all to come in the room. And it was the damnedest thing. They came up, basically in 6 months, with an great evaluation plan that would apply exactly the same to every traditional and charter school. And I'll show you how they did it. And it's been a lesson to me ever since. Here is their plan, that they wanted to have 50% improvement year over year in math and reading. We rated it 50% on improvement, 25% on proficiency, and 25% on other. The educators will understand this. If you look at your score, if you are Forest Hills, I'm guessing, and you have really high proficiency scores, 50, 60, 70% can read at grade level. If you get graded on how much you improve, you got a tough time. You don't have much room to go. On the other hand, if you have a school that's got a 5% proficiency score, and you go up the next year to 10%, there's some really good teaching going on in that school, but because you're at 10%, under the normal thing, you get an F. And so we said, these were the educators, said, what we want to do in Detroit is make it be 1/3 your proficiency, 2/3 your growth. How much are we teaching? And so I couldn't believe this, but here's what they did. They said, they agreed on this formula. They said, here, think about this. First year, you have 5% reading proficiency. Second year, you go to 12%. Third year, you go to 18%. These are some great teachers doing a great job. That school could get a B, even though it was at 18%, because you're telling people we're going the right way. And when we put this out, I had some of the greatest principals say, I'll go in and take the worst performing school. If I'm going to get graded on how fast we improve, I'll take that deal in a second, because these kids can learn. But if I'm going to get graded on what the overall level is, I'm going to be declared a failure. And so this is what they came up with. But if you start the first year at 18%, and the next year you drop to 15%, you get an F. If you start low and go down, you're going to get a bad grade. Detroit Public Schools, charter schools, teachers union, all agreed to this plan. We're all set, right? I'm going to put this book out, and the next year, we published it the first year just with the profiles. The next year, we're putting the grades. Books at press. I'm ready to do this. And one of the things that they said was, but we want to be measured on a child that's been in the same school 2 straight years. That's the right way to measure. If they transfer from somebody else, you didn't measure our performance. I said, okay, but the only people who had the data on which children have been there 2 straight years was the state superintendent's office. And when they went to release the data so we could publish it, I couldn't get it. And they were busy, and it wasn't transmitted. Finally, I went up and sat with the superintendent, Mike Rice, and said to him, we got to do this. Last year, we distributed the books to every hair salon and barber shop and library in the city. Now they're waiting for the grade. Parents are waiting. Here it is. And here's what he says. He said, what makes you think you can grade school? I said, what are you talking about? I said, your superintendent, your charter school principals, the teachers union, they've all agreed to that. He said, only I can determine what is fair evaluation. And I will not give you the data. And literally, he said, all you're going to do is confuse people. I said, look, I'm not trying to supplant what you're doing. He was still messing around trying to plan it. I said, if next year you get a new plan, I'll use your grades. But right now, everybody's agreed to do this. And the schools in the city of Detroit are ready to increase their performance on this. and he said, I'm not giving you the data because the parents won't understand the information. I walked out of that lunch and said, one of my new goals in life is to be elected governor and fire him. I mean, really, that's how I felt. I was so angry that somebody could put their own ego ahead of value. Fortunately, he resigned last year, and there appears to be a much better superintendent. But the program was killed. But here's my point, is you think educators can't do this. I think they can. Because to this day, you cannot figure out as a parent what to do. And so what I'm saying is, let's bring educators together. And you write the standards now that aren't changed for 5 years. And I want to have this committee of educators, and then I do 3 ways. What I would do is this. I would say each school district can have 1 of 3 choices. You could be growth focused. 50% is growth. If you are a low performing school right now, you would want to adopt the growth focus because you get your B's and A's by how fast you go up. But if you're already a high performing district, you may say, I want to have a proficiency focus. I want 50% to be evaluated on how high we are and the other 25% growth. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you can say, I'll have a balanced focus. We'll balance the 2 between growth and proficiency and allow each school district with the input from their local educators to make your decision. But once you sign up, you're signed up for 5 years. We're not changing the standard. You pick what's right for you. And for the first time, we will have year after year parents knowing exactly how their schools are being evaluated. They can look at the grades, they can understand them. I believe we can get a group of educators to agree to this formula and then allow your local district to make your decision. Okay, if we do that, I want to rebuild the CTE programs in this state. And here's what happened. In 2011, the state adopted something called the merit curriculum. And basically what they did is every high school kid should go to college and we're going to prepare them. Michigan has more college prep requirements in their high school curriculum than any state in the country. And what it did was totally killed the scheduling flexibility. CTE programs used to be half a day at your base school, half a day at CTE. We got $100,000 jobs in HVAC and auto mechanics and electrical work, electricity and hospital work and the like. But we don't have the ability to run CTE programs because we basically said to these children, if you're not going to college, you're less than. And I'm saying, where did we lose our way? We should have a state where every child at the age of 14 is exposed to college as a good track, is exposed to these other tracks, and has quality CTE programs. And my favorite superintendent, Mike Rice, himself said, 41% of the school districts are CTE deserts. This is the guy who's supposed to be in charge of the schools and admits, and as I drive around this state, parents are despondent in a lot of these districts. They have literally no CTE programs. They got kids who have these talents. But when you steal $1.3 billion, you don't have the money to fund the CTE programs. So I want to put flexibility back in. And what I want to do is this. That I want to have a curriculum that has the ability to do both. You have the flexibility, first-class CTE programs, first-class college prep programs. Let's go back to paid apprenticeships. Let's go back to dual enrollment in high school and college. Let's go back to trade school type things and the kind of co-op program some of you may have had. Because today, we have 47,000 vacant positions. The construction costs here in Grand Rapids are through the roof. Construction costs in Detroit are through the roof because we don't have enough people to fill the jobs. Let's celebrate all of these careers. And we can do that if you don't take the money away. So today, Indiana's at $168 million, Pennsylvania's $105 million, Michigan has only $40 million of CTE. When you take $1.3 billion out of the schools, who gets shortchanged? It's the children. And I'm saying, as we phase it in over 5 years, let's fund those CTE programs up to $200 million a year. And then the last piece, and this is the one that causes some of my friends some heartburn, But here's what I'm saying, that once you do all these things, we have to have responsibility for the principals and the superintendents to deliver. That is, I have been talking for years to principals and superintendents, why are the children not achieving? And they know the kids aren't achieving. And they say, I never know what my funding is. It keeps getting diverted. I don't know what my measurement is. They change it back and forth. And I say to them, what if you knew this? What if you knew that you could have a performance standard your local school district adopted? What if you knew for the next 5 years you have growth in your funding because we're going to restore the $1.3 billion? And what would you do if you knew none of this could change? You now have measurements. Can you deliver outcomes for our children? And almost to a person, the principal and superintendent said, if I've got the autonomy and I've got the funding, these children can learn. And that's what I'm proposing. But as far as I'm concerned, you ought to have 3 years, right? I mean, there's a point at which, right, we'll give you, the first year you're failing, we'll give you more resources, we'll set up an office of school performance, we'll give you help. Second year, we'll give you help again. But if by the third year, you're failing and still declining, we have to have an honest conversation that says we need to have a change in direction. And I want to have a process. You could have unusual cases where there could be some appeal, but by and large, I'm saying to the administrators of this state, if we put $1.3 billion in and give you autonomy, I expect student outcomes to improve within 3 years. We've seen it in Louisiana, we've seen it in Idaho, we've seen it in Indiana, we've seen it in Mississippi. And I think that we can do it here. And so that's what our plan is. And I would say to all of you, imagine a state where you knew the funding was stable for 5 years. You knew what the measurement was for 5 years. The educators picked the measurement for their districts. You had the money to build out CTE programs. What about any of that is Republican or Democrat? I actually think we could build a coalition to get the legislature to adopt this so that you know what you have year after year. And every election doesn't have to be the most important election in history because we have a mission plan. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Those are my ideas. Now I want to hear from you what you like, what you don't like, what you would change, and get your reaction. So go ahead, we'll take our first person. So tell us your name and where you're from.
I'm D. Jones. I stay here in the city of GR. I like your plan. I am the esports and gaming pioneer who helped our school district build 8 esports labs and help our county library invest hundreds of thousands. And I'm actually working on connecting our schools, our historical underinvested schools, into colleges and universities to basically get them to do their co-op programs so students can actually do the 11 weeks on campus. I've seen it in your plan, so a lot of our plans actually align with what I'm doing in real life. I do like that, but I also got the government to adopt 3D printed construction, and I know that the first 3D printed house was printed in the state of Detroit. So overall, would you adopt 3D printed construction for the state, and would you be willing to work with both sides of the aisle to get the building codes to not be under pending litigation so we can actually be able to construct things and be able to build equitable wealth for our families?
So the answer is I want to work with you because and we're going to have an affordable housing day, but we got to take the costs out of housing. But I want to stay on this, but I want to go back to your esports, right? Esports kind of sounds good because kids play video games. I spent time with the Davenport University Championship esports team. I spent hours with them. These kids are tech geniuses. Yeah, they're into that Smash Brothers game and their competitions. But what they know about AI and technology in the future, what you have done with esports is you've unlocked an interest in technology. But these are the kinds of programs we should have. And I just want to say thank you for what you're doing on that, because it's the kind of education the kids of the future should have. Other folks, tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. Last time, the superintendent of Traverse City was all mad at me and made for entertainment, so don't hesitate.
Hi, Andrea Heidel, Ken ISD board member. And I really like your number 2 point about going past the state's budget. and no budget, no pay. I would appreciate knowing how you're going to do that. And then my second question is, all of your plans assume 5 years.
Right.
And that assumes you are going to be reelected.
Well, it doesn't. So let me start with your first question, which was, remember your first question again. You threw me on the re-election. I hadn't thought that far ahead.
State budget.
So here's what I did. So when they wouldn't do this, I proposed this bill. The polling showed 81% approved it. Matt Paul and the Republicans put my bill up for a vote. The Republican speaker said, you know what, Mike's right. We're always going to fight with each other. The only way we're going to get this done on time is to do this. He put it up for a vote. None of the Democrats voted for an accountability bill. Now, this is crazy. Nobody is going to do it, but when I'm the governor, and we're talking about this every day, you tell me, how many of you think legislators should not get paid if they don't adopt budget cuts? All right? So what I'm going to do is be out there with you saying, look, I don't care about blaming the Republicans or Democrats. I just want to make sure next July 1, the budget's done. You're going to have exactly the same fight. You'll just have it in May and June instead of September and October. Let's just speed up the fight so the schools can open on time. I think we could get that passed. But your second question is maybe the most important one, which is how do you know it's still there after I'm gone? And I'm thinking about this. If I do this and when I'm gone it gets changed back, I wasted years of my life. And so when I became the mayor of Detroit, if you had seen the mayors and city councils in the years ahead of me, it was nonstop conflict, fighting over everything, vetoing everything, changing things around. And when I got elected, and I got elected by saying to people, I'm going to heal the divisions and bring people together. And believe me, in a city like Detroit, with decades of racial tension, when I started out, it wasn't easy. I convinced council people, here's what we should do on economic development. We're not going to give people cash up front to bring a business here, but we'll discount them on their new taxes when they build. We're going to make a commitment to build this riverfront because it's critical. We're going to make a commitment to affordable housing so young people can stay here. I just left, and my successor, Mary Sheffield, took my place. I was city council president. The last time a sitting city council president got elected mayor of Detroit was 1947. A guy named Van Andel. Ever since then, the city was going so bad it had anything to do with it. You couldn't win the election. But now, Mary Sheffield who said, I'm going to build on what Mike did, and I'm going to take it farther and reach more neighborhoods. She got elected with 77% of the vote. And she and the council are committed to building on what I did. It wasn't because it ran well as I was there and it fell apart. People saw the benefit of working together. Detroiters are working, the crime rate is down, the riverfront is beautiful. They saw the benefit. I am convinced that there are Republicans and Democrats of goodwill. You know some people ran for the legislature? They don't run because they hate somebody. Usually they run because something happened in a local nursing home, something happened in their school, something happened on their party. They ran for office because they wanted to do something. And then they get to Lansing. It is hard to describe how toxic it is. But you get to Lansing, you got your hopes for your health care plan, and they say, sorry, if you're not in the majority, you don't matter. So we're going to take up the issue that beats the hell out of the other party so we get the majority. I said, okay. Well, then they get the majority. Well, we can't do that because we might lose the majority. And they lose their way. And what I'm saying is, and I'm hearing from lots of legislators say, I can't wait till you get here. A lot of legislators of goodwill would like to be able to solve problems that last beyond their time there. And so I do believe that we can build long-term commitment. There's issues you're never going to agree on. But tell me about quality schools. Why can't Republicans and Democrats agree on that? And if I don't get elected as an independent, 10 years from now, I can tell you, it's going to go back and forth every 2 years. Nothing's going to change. And we're not going to be 44th, we're going to be 48th or 49th in the country. And so I'm trying to change it. And if somebody has a better way, I'm open to it. Other questions?
First of all, thank you for coming here this evening. We really appreciate it. My name is Ron Gorman. I'm the superintendent of Kent ISD. What you shared here this evening, I think lots of educators can get behind. But full disclosure, when I looked at 10, I thought it was throw the superintendent, throw the principal into the bus model, and I think I've shared that before. I think what you shared this evening is something that folks could get behind because they've got some skin in the game. What I would like to showcase this evening, though, is career and technical education. I would like the narrative to change so it's not one or the other. When we look at Lexile levels in career technical education centers, they're much higher than even in local high schools. So my hope is, if you get elected, it's one or the other. It's if you do this, you can still go to college.
Absolutely.
Because my assumption is someone who's an EMT would be a phenomenal doctor. Right.
Right. And you have people who are electricians who end up becoming contractors and building houses, right? They're absolutely. But hang on, no, don't take the microphone back yet. I want to come back to the first thing.
Yes.
So you tell me, if we say to the people of state, $1.3 billion is here, here's what we're expecting. You tell me who do we hold responsible for changing outcomes? Is my approach going to work, or do you have a better way to do it? Because don't you think you have to say to people that you're going to put that kind of money in, we can change the direction?
Get rid of the ambiguity.
Okay.
Get us our funding on time. Right? Give us a clear roadmap, and then hold us accountable. I think all educators can see that.
And that's what I'm saying.
100%.
If this gets adopted, are you in favor of it?
I'm 100%.
You're not worried you're going to lose your job?
I'm not worried about losing my job,
yeah.
Right? But I know that some schools are positioned differently, right? And I know that if a school goes from 1% proficient to 99% proficient overnight, you're going to have the Department of Education over
I understand.
right? So therefore, I love the growth model, but I also love the proficiency model and selecting what you want and holding you accountable.
So you actually like this plan?
I do like that plan.
I'm glad to hear it. Okay. The superintendents make me nervous. Go ahead. But this is how I learned. Other folks, go ahead. Tell us your name and where you're from.
Hello, I'm Valerie Beam, and I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've spent 34 years of my career in public schools, working in districts all over the state. And you've hit on a lot of emotional touch points for me. I've worked with a lot of superintendents, but my question I'm going to zero in on CTE. So what systems can we put in place to draw teachers to be able to teach skilled trades? Because right now, they're an endangered species,
right,
if you will. So what systems can we put in place to retain those teachers?
You know, the question you're asking is a really sensitive one. And so in Detroit this year, so we have a school called the Randolph Academy on the west side where they do construction trades. They literally build small houses and tear them down. I raised $10 million for the Randolph Academy because I wanted young people in Detroit to be able to get into the trades. And so I always stop by and see the superintendent. So I went by and saw the superintendent in July. I said, the principal of Randolph. I said, you all set? He says, well, this year we're not going to be able to have electrical work or welding in our schools. I said, wait. No high school student in Detroit is going to have electrical or welding this year. He says, no. He says the workers are making so much in the construction trades, I'd have to pay them $110,000 for them to give up their job and teach. I said, these are opportunities for kids. Pay them $110,000. And he said, the superintendent is not going to take money out of the system and pay these two instructors more than all the teachers. I said, you know what? You've got a good point. And so I talked to the union, but the city of Detroit had training money. And I paid for the welding instructor and the electrical instructor out of City of Detroit training funds, and everybody was happy. My thing is this. If you create, instead of $40 million CTE funds, $200 million, and it's separately funded, now you have a way that you can invest in CTE instruction in the long run and not diminish the teachers who are in the traditional classrooms. But you can't pit them against each other, right? And so, but you shouldn't have to have the mayor randomly go by saying, how are things going, right? That's not the way CTE should work. And I want to build a system where it is funded, because it is expensive to get these types of instructors, and it can be worked out. Other questions? Go ahead.
Good evening, Kwame Simmons from Detroit. So I think, piggybacking on the superintendent here, I think when I think back to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, was a huge thing 15 years ago. Schools investing, it makes a ton of sense. The data now reflects 40% of schools that adopted those curriculum had graduates to go into those professions. Of those 40% who went into those careers, only 20% of them felt prepared to engage. So the question for you is, if the CTE investment is to go through, how would you then align the rest of the government to ensure that our graduates are competitively employed to take advantage of those diplomas?
Yeah, I mean, this is the fundamental question, right? What's the quality of instruction at the high school level? What's the quality of instruction post-high school, right? Community college, training programs and the like. And one of the things the governor has done is put a lot of money into the certificate programs post-high school and put money into things like Going Pro, although that's starting to be reduced. But it's something that we've got to do together. I don't know whether one of the superintendents would like to talk to, how do we do this? How do we make sure that the end result is good? Any of the superintendents want to answer that? Go ahead. My favorite superintendent. Oh, hang on. Okay. Dan, what do we do about that?
Well, high school is 4,400 hours. That's how much instructional time kids spend. And we have too much time on the wrong stuff. My daughter's here, she's in high school, she's in 10th grade. In Algebra 2, which we require all kids to take, we spend 3 weeks on imaginary numbers. Now, imaginary numbers is like the square root of -1. You can't get there, but it's this imaginary thing. And I've asked math teachers all over the place, tell me how this skill and knowledge base is relevant to this young person who's going to be an adult soon, to their future. And they said, well, this is what's in the standards. Well, the standards are 25 years old. What else do we have here that's 25 years old? Right now, what do you have on you that's 25 years old? I mean, Apple, yeah, just our physical body.
More than 25, yeah.
And so we're teaching too many standards. So what teachers say all the time is, all I have time to do is tell the kids to sit there. Try to sit 7 hours a day. Sit there while I talk to you about everything. Imagine learning golf by someone talking to you about golf and never actually practicing it. We don't provide opportunities, except for in CTE and the fine arts, for kids to practice the things that adults actually do. Adults don't actually work with imaginary numbers, not that I've found. I mean, if you are, let me know. But so we have a misalignment in what we're demanding our teachers to do and what we're asking our kids to endure. And then kids, all they know is, if I just get the right credits and the right GPA, when I get to the thing after high school, it'll all become clear. And the unfortunate thing is it doesn't for a lot of kids. It doesn't. And so we need to remake those 4,400 hours. I would even call it 6,600 hours because you add middle school in there as well. So that the things kids are doing is actually practicing the stuff that adults actually do. That's why they engage and thrive in fine arts and CTE, but they're bored to tears in the other disciplines that are disconnected from reality.
Interesting.
Have you heard of the Alpha Plan?
Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm with Gideon Brewer, Forest Hills. I have 3 kids in the Forest Hills schools, but I'm just curious, if you had AI up there for one of your bullets, I'm just curious, if you could expand on, where you potentially see the value.
So tell us about it.
Yeah, so Alpha Plan, it started out in Austin, Texas. It's been rolled out to other cities around the country. It is a private plan, but basically it focuses on AI, so it tailors the teaching plan, AI tailors the teaching plan to the student. And so they're spending the first 2 or 3 hours of the day based on their tailored education plan, and then they spend the rest of the day, which gentleman said, what are the things they can do that adults actually do? They spend the rest of the day practicing public speaking, entrepreneurship, coding, things where there's actually demand. So I know you had it up there at one of your points.
No, it is.
See a lot of
and we could end up in a half-hour AI discussion. But think about this: is I'm the kind of person who wants to solve the problem. I'm going to get the educators, there's going to be difference of opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. But let's get the curriculum to a good practical area and then give some discretion to the superintendents. Taylor, we're going to be measuring the outcomes, and over time, right, we can adjust our strategies. But you guys tell me, are you engaged in these kinds of conversations? Can you influence things now? Or are you stuck in a system that you don't really know who made the rules? Okay. Other folks, this is fascinating. Go ahead, yes.
Hi, Becky Redmer. I'm from Jefferson Public Schools. So you mentioned a lot of flexibility, and I really appreciate that. And I think we hear the amount of time that's being spent in the classrooms. It's hours, it's minutes. I saw Indiana up there quite a bit. Indiana got rid of seat time 10 years ago to allow for flexibility and for teacher training and allowing kids to get to CTE and have flexible pathways. We have a pupil accounting manual that just came out last week for this year that's 179 pages long. That's tied to our membership, that's tied to our funding. So for us to get flexible and do some of the things that you're talking about, like to operationalize the big ticket items, it's going to take our ability to have that flexibility and to be able to look at seat time altogether to get kids to where they want to be.
Yeah, and so here's what I would say. If your 179-page manual was making you top 10 in America in outcomes, I'd say stick to it, right? But think about, does anybody here have the ability? Teachers, every teacher I talk to knows what's wrong. Somehow, in the Lansing bureaucracy, what the educators know doesn't get translated into what we need for the children. What would we have? We had a different kind of state when you got engaged and you wrote this together. But your point is a great one. I haven't seen the 179-page document, but we know, everybody here can see it's not working, right? Other thoughts? Go ahead. I'm going to incorporate some of this in the next time I do these, so I love these suggestions. Go ahead.
Hi, Greg Godwin, Ferris State University. 4 generations of educators in my family. The question I have that's not necessarily clear in your plan is the actual support for the teachers.
Yeah.
Teachers can't even afford to teach and have a family. So there's that issue. The other is there's other types of support that are needed. As a college professor, I am now a psychologist. And that type of thing I wasn't prepared for. I just can't imagine what it's like in the lower levels. So the support for teachers for those types of things.
So think about how we do this. Are we going to prescribe it for Lansing, or are we going to give you flexibility? Let's talk about the mental health side. In the United States today, there's an average of 1 counselor for every 250 students. The state of Michigan has the fewest counselors in America, 1 for every 600. So we don't have support. Again, I'll come back to why. They keep taking the money out of your system. Now, the amount of money that's coming out of Grand Rapids, Forest Hills, whatever, it's $1,000 a student off the foundation grant that's being diverted. I don't want to say to West Ottawa schools, you put this much into higher teacher salary, this much into counselors, this much into parents. What I want to do is have you have the money, we've agreed on the outcomes you're going to be measured on, and I want you as the educators to come up with the right allocation. You don't want Lansing saying to you, how many mental health professionals do you get? You don't want Lansing negotiating your teacher contracts, do you? Does anybody want Lansing negotiating teacher contracts? Okay, so I want to put the resources and the power back to the schools and then hold them accountable for the outcomes. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Dr. Kelly Christopher. I'm the CEO and founder of the STEM Greenhouse. I did want to mention that I do have a PhD in engineering, and imaginary numbers are foundational to computer science and engineering.
You asked the question, Dan. The doctor gave you the answer.
One of the issues, though, sometimes is that our educators do not understand how these things are applied in science, technology, engineering, and math. And so not only talking to educators, but people outside of education can be helpful to provide our students with a better education that will apply to their future careers.
Isn't this great? We all learn from each other. Thank you. All right, so if you want to be an engineer, you got to understand imaginary numbers. I got you. Go ahead. I just she get.
I'm an educator without a portfolio, but I taught second grade as a superintendent and a principal, ran a career tech center, and spent 21 years in Lansing as an educational lab. So I love the idea about this educate, I don't like the idea of the desert, but it's very true. And what I sense is that you're looking at intermediate school district cooperation, enhancements.
For sure.
Also, I think that you probably, because I know your background, have looked at some of the categoricals that have been around a long time that have promise that can spread the wealth in terms of millage equalization, both in not only vocab, but also special. So there are some really unique categoricals that really need to be reinvented in a special way. Additionally, I think I heard from Ron, I know Ken has been very good at it. The integrated academics model in technology offerings is so positive, and Massachusetts is like a country in that, and I think it's something we need to look at. Having run the center, when you got a kid driving or being in a school bus for 30, 40 minutes, an hour, going to these centers where they're learning these specific skills, it really detracts from education. Another thing, the gentleman from Ferris, they have a program that I think it's still around. MOCAT, they still do that up there, which is a fast-track way of getting people certified who are not necessarily having a college degree. The same thing could happen in areas that need elementary school teachers.
For sure.
And we used to call them the old county normal system in that old.
Right.
Not quite back to the 19th century. Anyways, but thank you for
Thank you.
for
And you know, the ISD thing, so you're raising an interesting thing. You've got some districts with great ISD programs. You have the adjoining district that has almost nothing. The adjoining district doesn't necessarily have to build its own $10 million center, right? But today, you have to pay the district you're going to if you take a kid, and you don't have it in your budget. If we increase the CTE budgets over 5 years, now you can make a logical decision. Maybe two districts are going in together and sharing, right? I want to put that money in your hands and the flexibility in your hands.
With our skills training background and economic base in Michigan should be number one in skills training.
So you like this plan?
I love it.
You love the plan. All right. Go ahead. Yeah.
Luis Torres, Grand Rapids resident, former Detroit resident, and community member. One thing that I haven't heard enough about is the incredible investments that have been done in the last budget on English language learners and multilinguistic reading levels, high learning levels when it comes to maintaining native language in homes. Coming from Detroit, Hamtramck, Dearborn, understanding that retention of that home language and an English language learner has higher levels of reading ability, how in your plans are we going to maintain the historic levels of English language learner funding so that they can attain the English language as well as retention of home language? We live in a global society. We live in a global world. The highest percentages of our community's growing population are Latinx students. So how are we going to make sure that they feel heard, they feel welcome, and that they understand that keeping and maintaining that home language is super important for our community in Michigan as well as globally?
And so what would you like? What do you think we should do?
Well, I feel that we should continue and increase those funding levels for English language learners. When I came to the U.S., I didn't know any English, right? I'm traditionally Puerto Rican from Puerto Rico. So I had dedicated instructors. I had two teachers, one Puerto Rican, one Mexican, that taught me English and also retained my home language. So we had that through all of my elementary school. That funding went away.
So I think it was the second point up on the slide, and I went past it relatively quickly. But this is something that Governor Whitmer and the legislature have done well the last 2 or 3 years. They have increased the amounts for ELL learners. They've increased the amounts of special ed, et cetera. But I think I pointed out there, even with the increases, and there are steps in the right direction, we're still bottom 10 in the country.
And what I don't see is any application to the parents, right? When we're talking about skilled trades, we have some great skilled tradesmen that come from outside of the U.S. Latin American countries, Central American countries, South American countries, making sure that they're engaged and involved in that teaching, in that training, and in that applicability of their skill sets with their kids, so that they can pass those trades on to their children in everything from being a mechanic to being a builder to growing in the science and skill trades, making sure that Davenport University has a great program, having spent time there as well, in making sure that all of those skills that they bring from home countries in those home languages are also accepted here through different programs that we can do at a secondary level.
Those are great points. Thank you. Go ahead. I think you can hand off the microphone to your neighbor there. Go
Hi,
ahead.
my name is Heather Reigers. I live in Grand Haven. I'm a Grand Haven School Board trustee. I was an educator on the south side of Chicago in a charter school and in Inkster. I appreciate your listening and learning approach and your independent voice. There are many of us that are independent. That's how we solve problems, is by sharing our ideas and thoughts. Something I learned at the Michigan Association of School Board Conference this past fall is that high school credits are not time-bound, they're not subject-bound. You can get very creative, and you can have a teacher that can teach math and science in a STEM class, and you can, as a school board, creatively award high school credit. So there's an amazing opportunity for innovation in providing high school credits. You can also award a high school credit if you can demonstrate proficiency. So if you can speak another language, you should not have to take a world language class to graduate. You should just get the credit. And so, or mechanics, anything. There's endless ways to solve the problem and get the kids out of the seats, get them outside, the fresh air. We do have a technology issue in our schools. We've kind of gone over the top there. So I think there's something to be said about the neurological effects of too much technology. We need to think about those things. I would like more than $1.3 billion. I want my money back plus interest. And I also think we're in a district that has not passed a bond in 25 years, and we're struggling. Our mill rate is 0.069%. We have no money, and we are trying very hard. People can't afford to live where we are because we have Airbnbs and things. Yes, but we're performing well. So I'm just saying the money will be helpful. The innovation needs to be strong, and I think we can do it. So thank you for being here.
And I'd add one more piece to innovation, which is kind of interesting, is I like what you're talking about, the ways you can get there. Do you know in this state, if you're in high school and you want to be dual enrolled and take college credits while you're in high school so you can get a head start, do you know this state requires the high school district to pay the college tuition? That's the law of the state. And so you've got school districts in this state that will do everything to discourage their kids from enrolling early in college because they don't want to pay out the money. How does this make any sense, right? Think about how expensive college is. We are running this thing from the standpoint of bureaucrats as opposed to the standpoint of young people wanting to pursue their futures. And this is what I want to go at. Go ahead, who's next? So let's take a few more.
Right here.
Go ahead. Yes.
Jessica Johns, run the storehouse, former public school educator in inner city schools. And I actually like what Dan was saying earlier about just kind of the antiquated methods that we're using for education. And it came to mind because my son, who was also educated at Forest Hills Public Schools, brilliant child, but hated the public schools. He just didn't really feel like he was learning and being educated in the way that fit his methodology. And Universal Forest Products, who I'll give props to, who's a globally traded company, came in and talked to them about their business internship program. He's in his second year getting ready to graduate and is going to go on now into finance, which I would have never heard from him during his public school education because he didn't have that level of learning. So there's a program that's been launched in Colorado very successfully through an education program that's now going through the whole state, partnering businesses with these high schools that have shown huge success. And I'd love to see how we can get that started right here in Grand Rapids.
Aren't these interesting ideas? I love this. Go ahead. Who else is next? Okay, we'll take two more and then we'll wrap up. I'll stay and talk about what everybody wants to talk about.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Skipper, and I run a nonprofit across the state around teacher retention and thinking about the root causes around teacher retention. Some of the things that I love that. And I also sit on a school board as well. And I love a lot of what you said. It's on the backs, though, of teachers. And I think sometimes we love to say things like, teachers aren't teaching well, teachers are teaching antiquated. But the reality is about 60 to 70% of our teachers are experiencing toxic levels of stress every day in their school environments. As well as only 26% of our teachers are staying in their districts for more than 5 years, which means that our schools are spending a lot of money retraining, rehiring teachers every single year. And then when you also talked about how we've increased class sizes and also positions are sitting vacant, a lot of that's because we just can't find teachers to fill those positions. We have rural districts who are fulfilling their credits for language learning through online programs because they can't hire people. We have special education positions sitting vacant. So I'm wondering, as you talk about this and we think about the root cause, a lot of this is about also healing the teachers who are currently in our system, reinvigorating them so they can be creative. I think a lot of our teachers want to be creative. So what ideas do you have around that?
So you know more than I do, so let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You wake up tomorrow morning,
Yeah.
and you find out you're the governor of the state.
Yeah, I don't want to do that, but.
And pretend there's no rules.
Yeah.
You want to do one thing, the first thing to deal with the issues that teacher stress you just talked about.
Yeah.
What would be the first thing you would do?
Well, I think we actually need to invest in a lot more. When we talk about mental health and education, we talk about it sometimes as counselors bringing them into the school for our students. I actually think our teachers need to have access to a lot more mental health for themselves. We need to have insurance that covers that for all of our teachers. We need to have opportunities for them to receive coaching from educators who also are experiencing that. There has to be some healing in that space. Obviously, I feel really passionate about that because that's part of the work that we do. But we also, I will just say, we need to invest in the next generation of educator leaders because our educators need to be shown how to be a leader, not just a manager of a school. We need leaders who can envision how to build healthy adult cultures within their school districts and within their buildings because that's also really important for retaining and creating collaboration that's effective and creative across the board.
Well, thank you. Okay? Isn't this great building a conversation like this? Okay, go ahead. We'll take the last two over here.
Hi, I'm Tanel Hills. I sit on the private Christian school board, but I'm a product of public education, and I co-founded a nonprofit. We mentor middle and high school students. A lot of my friends are educators, and right now I'm a strong advocate for accessible education for all. I want to start there. However, many issues, as was just stated recently, a lot of the teachers are facing issues with, there are so many students with IEPs, and students who do not have the IEPs aren't able to be challenged. The education is, with them trying to address all the different diverse education levels within the classroom, it's not accessible for everyone. Like everyone isn't able to meet those challenges. So like the grading scores and everything, like the teachers, there has to be more resources. How do you plan to address that?
And that starts with the weighting formula, right? You've got to weight. Different children need different amount of resources depending on what where they come from, what their challenges are, et cetera. And so it's got to be part of the weighting factor. That's how you would address that.
So is that like adding more resources within the classroom?
So the way these formulas work is, the people who tell you the number offhand, but somebody who's in ELL is getting a larger than the 10,500 base share. Somebody who comes from a disadvantaged background, the school gets a larger amount. Somebody who is in special ed gets and they weight that. Most states in the country have figured this out years ago. Michigan's just starting to walk down that road. Right? And so again, you want to give the schools the resources to deal with it. I don't think you necessarily want the state telling you how to do it, but it has to be in your weighted formula. Is that the way to do it? Go ahead, last one. Go ahead.
Alexander Lowe. I work as a data analyst at Grand Valley State University and just very personally passionate about public K-12 education. I'm curious as to what your plan has for the summer experience for students. There's a lot of, from my understanding, of just like drop off and like not maintaining that knowledge. And I remember reflectively, like my summer reading experience with libraries was very huge for me. And so I would like to see, if it's not in there, I would like to see your plan detail support with K-12 education and maybe local libraries to maintain a summer reading experience.
So you're absolutely right. In fact, the summer program was up there on one of the funding plans on the Marshall Plan for Reading. But if you haven't seen the research on this, what you're saying is pretty stunning. In many cases, the wealthier districts and the poorer districts, from September to May, the progress is very close. And when you get to June, July, and August, the gap between how far the children from disadvantaged areas drop to the other areas when they start the next September is significant. The summer engagement is absolutely critical to get where we've got to go. It's got to be part, certainly of the Marshall Plan for Reading, but I think you're right. It should be more than that. So I just want to say thank you. How many of you guys think this plan has merit? Right? How many of you think about what we didn't say today? Nobody said the word Donald Trump, right? Nobody got mad at each other over this issue or that issue. I have no idea. I bet you were probably half and half Republican and Democrat here, but you couldn't really tell because what were we doing? We were talking about solving our children's education. And this is why I'm running as an independent. I go to farms, I go to small villages, and we have the same conversation. If you watch MSNBC and Fox and CNN, you think everybody in this country is just yelling at each other. But the truth of the matter is, most people in Michigan want to have this conversation. And I'm the kind of governor that after I'm in there is going to be having this conversation. I want to turn these decisions over to educators. I might get in the room as I did with Dr. Beatty and the charters, the teachers union, and help hammer out the final details. But I want to build consensus. And I actually think it's possible. And if you think it's possible, you probably haven't been to a governor's candidate night with like this before, right? They got answers for every question that could have been written by ChatGPT. But that's not me. I'm more interested in learning than pretending like I have all the answers. But every time I do these, I enhance the plan, and we keep going. If you want to help change politics, you got little volunteer cards there. You can scan it. You can fill it out. Share what I'm doing on your social media. It means a whole lot more if it comes from you to your friends than if it comes from me through Facebook or whatever. And I'm going to be back here on March 3rd at the, what is it? Hub 07. And this is how I'm campaigning. Okay, I'm just going group to group. And so I want you to bring your friends, bring the skeptics, and come out and say, come listen to this guy. And the next one, we're going to talk about affordable housing. We're going to talk about tech jobs in the future. We're going to talk about keeping our young people in this state. We're going to have a broader conversation. But today, I just thought education was so important. I wanted to have one night where we only talked about that. And for me, it's been just a terrific night. Thank you all very much for being here.